Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Good morning to those tuning in via webcast. This is the 6th annual Perkins Basic Orientation, and it is a generational transition orientation because we are entering Perkins 5. I appreciate everybody being here this morning as we walk together into that new era. I will introduce Dr. Rex Peebles, Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce at the Coordinating Board, who will give you welcome.
So, welcome. We actually do appreciate you being here. And so this transition from Perkins 4 to Perkins 5 reminds me of a time when I was still at Austin Community College, and I think I was a dean then, and the VP for instruction, we passed in the hallway, and we exchanged the sort of normal pleasantries of hi and all that kind of stuff, and so he said, well, how are you? And I think I responded with my usual, well, I'm okay, I think. And he stopped, and in as deadpan a fashion as he could, he said to me, oh, well, then you obviously don't understand the situation. And he was kidding, of course, but he did it so well that for a minute, he had me going there for a second. And I thought, well, what does this mean? Does this mean that security is back at my office packing it up, or what? And so, but I sort of feel that way about the transition from Perkins 4 to Perkins 5. Is that while everything looks okay at the moment, this may be the classic case of it'll get worse before it gets better, kind of thing. But we do have a transition year where things will remain relatively the same, except for those things that we must change, which will be discussed in greater detail here as we go through the day. And then next year, we'll make the full transition to Perkins 5. So we will launch some listening to your stuff this fall and try to get a lot of feedback and input from you guys. And as we go through this, then we will need to hear from you, the people on the ground who wind up having to really implement this stuff at your campuses, what is working and what's not working, and what we can do to change if we can. Sometimes we are stuck by law and so forth, but otherwise, if we can modify or change to make your lives and hopefully our lives easier as well, then we want to hear about that. But so we want to work with you as we go through this transition. And again, I just appreciate you being here. I appreciate the people that are listening in by distance. And so we appreciate your attendance, at least your virtual attendance as well. And so enjoy the day, and I will go to my next meeting. Thanks.
Thank you, Rex. I invite anyone who wants a closer view to move to the front row, which is currently empty. And we will move on into the day with a few housekeeping announcements. We have not put breaks on the schedule. Please just take your own break on your own for phone calls or anything else you need to take care of. If you've not been in this building before, restrooms are in the center of the hallway outside this conference room. I'd like to introduce the staff. We have with us Dwayne Hiller. Does anybody in this room know Dwayne? Maybe so. Dwayne has been all things CTE for a good many years here at the Coordinating Board, and has been a strong member of the Perkins team as we plan for Perkins 5 this spring. Dr. Sherry Rannis. Sherry joined us in spring of last year and has been valuable in helping to plan our Perkins 5 stakeholder outreach. And she'll be speaking to you a little bit later this morning in relation to that outreach. And newly, Dr. Marissa Garza, who has, yes. who has come over to AQW from our Strategic Planning and Funding Division. We did a successful steal on that one, and we're proud of ourselves. Also a good member of this Perkins team and assists as well with our OCR compliance. The order of the day is this. We will, as you see on the agenda, we'll begin with a little overview of the transition and implementation year, and then you'll hear from us about aspects of the basic application for coming up year 1920. Now, I need to make an announcement about the RFA. We had planned to release it today. If we had had our way, it would have been in your email inbox last night, ready for the day. One of our institutions is having an issue with some of its data that is delaying the final calculation of your allocation. And I know that that's probably the first page you turn to. So rather than release a provisional RFA and then have to amend it later, we are going to hold off for a few days. I'm told by our data people that we should be able to release it by the middle of this coming week. When you see screens this morning in Dwayne and Marissa's presentation about the application, they will be from text in the RFA. You will very soon be looking at that same text. Okay, so apologies for that. Please bear with us on that. Okay, and let me talk about one thing more. We will have Q&A at the end of most of our presentations. We will additionally have an open Q&A session following our Perkins discussion during the lunch hour.
We don't know what happened. They just.
We are going to try to accommodate our webcast participants along with our in-house participants. We have, for in-house, a microphone set up in the back. You will have to turn it off and on, but we will ask that you go to the microphone to ask your question, and we will be able to have you on screen as you ask a question. If we find that this arrangement isn't working, or if anybody just can't get to the microphone, you can raise your hand, and we will bring around a mic to you. If it looks as though this experimental podium is not going to suffice for us, we can also move to floating mics during the day. Now, those at a distance, you may email questions into the Perkins address. We should have this address on screen for you periodically, but if you don't have it in your memory, or if it's not on screen when you need it, it is perkins@THECB.state, S-T-A-T-E, .tx.us. And as needed, we'll repeat that. We will try to accommodate as many questions and comments from a distance as we can. Please know this, all of your questions that come in via email will be cataloged, and we will respond post-orientation to major questions that come up that don't get responded to during the question and answer sessions. During our lunchtime stakeholder session, any emailed comments along with your in-house comments at the podium will become part of the public record of stakeholder input that helps us to formulate the post-secondary side of the state plan this year. Okay, any questions on that before we move into the first presentation of the day? Oh, and I need to make an announcement. Our viewing screens that you should be able to see conveniently along the walls. Good heavens, I apologize. That you should be able to see along the walls are down at the moment. We're working on that. If you need to see the screen, I do invite you to move to a place where you can see the screen. Okay. Am I forgetting anything, folks? Okay, all right. Well, I'm going to kind of do an overview of Perkins 5 with an eye on transition year and implementation year. Okay? Do we have somebody manning transition on the slides, or do I have, there it is. Okay, here we go. Okay, as you all well know, Perkins 5 goes into effect on July 1st. Its statutory purpose is shown there on the screen. You can read it for yourself. I will point out that the bullets that follow under that statutory purpose point out new emphases in the statute, not new elements of the statute, of the Act. New emphases are tightening of pathways from secondary, post-secondary into career, improving students' academic and technical achievement with more emphasis on special populations and reducing barriers to special populations, and on accountability for those students' progress. And again, these are not new elements, but Perkins 5 emphasizes those more strongly. Now here's the next screen. It's a busy screen, and I will just let you read it on your own, but let me kind of go through the high elements of it. This is new program components in the Perkins 5 Act. There's a new, robust definition, statutory definition of programs of study, and it will be relevant to you in the implementation year. You will be required to do a comprehensive local needs assessment prior to developing your implementation year application. And let me stop here and define transition and implementation for anybody who is wondering what I mean by those terms. Transition year means this coming year, 1920, FY 1920. We're under a transitional state plan, and we have a transitional Perkins 5 year. Implementation year refers to FY 20 and 21. And Perkins will be under, in this state, a full 4-year state plan at that point, and we will fully implement the Perkins 5 program. Okay, continuing, new in Perkins 5 is allowing funded career exploration activities for grades 5 through 8. Now, none of these 5 through 8 graders can go into your CNA program or anything like that, but you can certainly provide career exploration activities and fund it with Perkins under the new Act. There's a formal definition for CTE concentrator for the secondary level and the post-secondary level. The two definitions are different and appropriate to each level. This formal definition is fine with us. The Perkins 5 definition is exactly the definition the state of Texas has been using for post-secondary since 2006 when Perkins 4 was enacted. We will have no change in the way we calculate your Perkins core indicator performance other than accommodating the new special populations categories. Another major change, state-defined rather than Department of Ed negotiated core indicator performance targets. We will decide what is appropriate for the state of Texas. If our proposed core indicator targets meet certain statutory criteria, Ed must accept them. The whole idea here, I think, behind the Act and the way Department of Education is approaching this is that states have more latitude to do what works for the states. I will tell you also that we will not get a surprise every year as core indicators are adjusted. We will submit and have approved core indicator performance targets for all 4 years of the state plan. So we will know, ahead of the game what we're looking at. And then finally, significantly revised core indicators. I know you all have all had a look at these. There is no equivalent of core indicator 1 under Perkins 4 for Perkins 5. skills attainment as a discrete count is no longer part of the core indicators. I know you're aware as well that we do no longer have 2 core indicators for non-traditional gender participation in CTE programs. Instead, we count percentage of CTE concentrators for non-traditional. You'll like this screen. State of Texas gets a whopping $111 million plus some change for Perkins this year. It's still a 70-30 split between secondary and post-secondary. This year, post-secondary has $33 million and some change. These are historically large allocations. The statute recommends a progressive increase for each year covered under the 4-year plan, and if Congress takes those recommendations, CTE in this state and every other state will reap a bonus from that. Okay, and let me move to the formula allocation. And you see, too, that the 85% formula, 10% state, 5% state admin still holds. For initial formula allocation is $29.6 million. That's on a par with last year. And we expect to do a revised allocation. Now, nothing's done till it's done, but we expect a healthy revised allocation to come to you before your applications are due this year. So this is a good allocation, and I look forward to our being able to get the RFA out so you can see what your part of the pot is. Okay, what to expect. Before I look at the upcoming year, I'm going to look at the implementation year. Implementation year, you're going to have some work to do. FY 2021, you're going to have to get started on this work well before September, well before July of 20, when you'll write your implementation year applications. You're going to want to start working on this winter or before. Beginning in 21, we'll be under a new state plan, as I said. Beginning in 21, as we begin 21, you will have completed a comprehensive local needs assessment with strict statutory requirements to it. And that comprehensive local needs assessment, I will refer to it as CLNA. CLNA will guide your development of your local application for your FY 2021 program. This really is a generational change, and it is part of the new emphasis on alignment of pathways and on accountability. Now, what to expect? In your implementation year application, you will need to allocate Perkins funds to address special populations performance gaps identified in the CLNA. And you must put a program in place to address those gaps. Now, you'll be able to supplement with institutional funds or other grant funds, but if your CLNA identifies gaps in performance between the CTE student population as a whole and special populations, you will need to seek to rectify that gap with the use of Perkins funds. You must additionally report your CLNA findings to us, and I'll talk a little bit more about that a little later today, and write your local application in such a way that requested expenditures for CTE programs, for equipment, supplies, and the like, are justified by labor market data appearing in your CLNAs. And that sounds pretty stringent, but I'm going to talk about this one here. Just let me linger on this. Do any of you have CTE programs for which there's no labor market in your regions? I didn't think so. You're just going to have to document it for us. If not in your region, at least in the state. Okay, moving on. Okay, implementation year. As part of developing an approvable application for FY21 implementation year, you must have at least one program of study as it is defined in Perkins 5. I'll show you those requirements on the next slide. And the good news for you is that after you do all this work, after we all climb this steep hill, because we are in this together, after that's done, you'll have to update your local application every other year. You can update it annually if you want to, but you can write your local application, the old local plan, that's responsive to your CLNA. You can write that for 2 years and update it every other year if that's how you want to establish your planning time frame. You'll still develop a performance improvement plan every year, and you'll still write a budget annually. But we're going to be able to relax what we have to have you do to put your application together every year. And here's that program of study definition. A lot of text here. I'll just run through the bullets of it. A program of study is defined by Perkins 5, must incorporate challenging academic standards, must address both academic and technical knowledge and skills, including employability skills, must be aligned with the needs of industry for the state, the region, the local district, or if appropriate, tribal economy. Must be progressive in specificity, moving from all aspects of an industry to more occupation-specific instruction. Must have multiple entry and exit points that incorporate credentialing. And must culminate in the attainment of a recognized post-secondary credential. Any questions about this? Any concerns? You're doing most of this already, aren't you? I don't know if it's evident in this definition, but this pathway, well, yes, it is. It's stated in the introductory clause, includes both secondary and post-secondary instruction. So this pathway needs to go from high school into college into workforce. And most of you are already doing this anyway. Now, we'll be discussing some resources we have under development to support you in developing your CLNAs and putting together your applications for next year. Your CLNA will drive a lot of what you do. The program of study requirement is kind of a standalone. We will welcome any inquiries about program of study as defined in the statute as we move forward, okay? Now, all of that high stepping talked about, let's move into a discussion of transition year. Minimal required changes. We don't want to make you do any more than you have to do that's different for this year, because you've got your work cut out ahead of you for implementation year. Dwayne and Marissa will outline for you the changes in the RFA and what will be required for the application this year. The local application replaces the old local plan. It's a change in terminology. You have fewer questions under the new local application, 9 total, and a 10th question about 60 by 30 TX. Of those 9 statutory questions, 1 is not due this year because it's about the local plan, and sections of 2 other questions are not due this year for the same reason. So you will see when we do put out the RFA that you've got a lighter load this year by far. Now, we have no core indicators for the transition year. You will see a blank in the grid that shows your program performance. What we want you to do this year, and Dwayne and Marissa will talk about this, is take those new core indicators thoughtfully and look at what you're doing locally that will aid you in addressing them. Look at what you can do locally that will aid you in addressing the new core indicators. And we want you to write your program improvement and evaluation plans for your local vision. We think that will lay a good foundation as you move forward in planning. Would you please go to the podium and pick up the mic and turn it on, Dr. Keeling-Olsen? Our first question of the day. It would be Leslie Keeling-Olsen, wouldn't it?
So I think beyond the transition year into the following year, will those 9 statutory questions in the local application look the same next year?
Yes. That's a good question, and let me go ahead and address that. We'll probably, in fact, we will say this later today. Our RFA will lay out the entire implementation year for you. You will see this year what you're looking at next year. We have made it clear in bold text what is not to be fooled with this year, okay? But we will lay it all out for you. Okay, thank you for that question. Okay. And we are at the end. We've got a few minutes for questions. Before we move ahead, do we have any questions about the overview I've just given you of transition and implementation years? Any questions at a distance? Okay. Yes, Dr. Keeling-Olsen?
So I know a lot of us, well, I know the high demand occupations list came out with updates, and I know some of my colleagues have addressed some concern about it says high demand occupations list and or in demand for that region. How do we need to document the in demand?
You will presumably look at job openings over a span of time. We will be able to give you guidance and have some definitions for those once we have a state plan kind of in place. I believe the transition plan documents in demand. There should be an increase from year to year in the need for those positions. Joyce, you're nodding. Okay, would you bring Joyce the mic? Or let Joyce get up and go to the mic? We're going to call on Joyce for this.
Thank you, Leslie. Yes, in-demand occupations, and you are exactly right. That in-demand occupations basically means that it may not be a high demand in your area, but it is a job and occupation that is in demand. It may not be high wage at that point, but it is in demand. And then it is continually growing, whether that's 1% growth or 5% growth. And some of you, as you know, in the state of Texas, all jobs are changing. So as things become, as we get new industries that are coming up, it's in demand. Right now, construction is high in demand, but it's cyclical. It comes and it goes, it ebbs and it flows. So when we start to look at, and I am happy that it's not just high demand, but it's also in demand. Mm-hmm. Take this, Leslie, back so that you can keep it at your desk.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Okay, any other questions? Okay. Any questions from our webcast audience? Okay. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, which is good. We will use those ahead of schedule minutes to give you a little break before lunch if we keep accumulating them. Yes, ma'am.
It's a technical thing. I just
Okay, I'm being given written instructions. They say, after Mindy talks, we need a break so they can fix to post slides on webcast.
Make it more clear.
Right. So we're working on that technical issue. Thank you for letting me know we have that email. Okay. Webcast folks, be patient with us. We'll take a little break and have this resolved shortly. Thank you.
Yes, I know, we know.
Let us take 10 minutes, okay? They think they'll have it rebooted by then. And I've been asked to mention, and this is a fact, we always do this, all these PowerPoints, all these slides will be posted on our website, so they'll be available to you later. They'll be on the Coordinating Board's Perkins page. Okay, thank you. We'll see you in just a few minutes when we get some issues resolved. in the room. If you need to move to see the presentation slides, you certainly are welcome to do so. So that pertains to people in the room. Now, second, we are working right now to PDF the day's slides and get them onto the Perkins webpage on the website. And you all know the Perkins webpage. That's where you go to access the application and the RFA, so on and so forth. We're going to, as soon as possible, get the slides posted there. So if you have a computer here, if anybody's got a tablet or laptop, you can access the slides on your screen. If you're at a distance, you can certainly access slides on your screen through the web page at a distance. We have been told that there are some distortions for people watching at a distance. This should rectify that problem. Use the network Education Go Get It. It's our open network. Okay? All right. And with that, I will introduce Dwayne Hiller, Dr. Marissa Garza. They will talk about Perkins local application, Perkins core indicators, and what's the third thing on your agenda? Performance evaluation. Performance improvement plan. So please give them your attention. Now beware, this is where we're going to talk about pages of the RFA that we have not been able to release yet. Bear with us on that. Ask questions as needed. We will try to leave time for Q&A at the end of this presentation as well. Okay, Dwayne and Marissa.
Thank you, Mindy. Hi, everyone. So I'm going to start talking about the local application part. And so just quickly, I know Mindy is going to talk more in detail of the comprehensive local needs assessment. So as you're aware, it is going to take effective 2021. So just a little bit, the comprehensive local needs assessment is a new feature for Perkins. It precedes and supports the college local application, requires consultation with defined groups and stakeholders, and it must be updated at least every 2 years. So just a kind of couple of bullet points there for you all just to kind of highlight. I know people are writing things, so I'll kind of wait a little bit. Okay, so the local application. So there will be minimal changes during the transition year for 1920, but beginning in 2021, the local application must address, of course, the results of the comprehensive local needs assessment, courses and activities to be supported, including at least one state-approved program of study, career exploration, career guidance, and counseling to be provided, and then how CTE programs will improve students' academic and technical skills, and of course, activities intended to remove barriers for special POPs. So provisions of work-based learning opportunities is definitely also in a needs addressed for the local application. And then opportunities for high school students to earn post-secondary CTE, coordination with the CB and other post-secondary institutions for recruitment, retention, and professional development of CTE faculty, administrators, and specialized instructional support personnel. And of course, how gaps in performance of student subgroups will be addressed is also going to be in the local application. So the local needs assessment must justify problematic uses of funds applied to the local application. So additionally, the Act places new emphasis on supporting programs that are sufficient size, scope, and quality. Though this is not a new requirement, importantly, the term is not statutorily defined, but local colleges will make the case for programs to support with Perkins funds in their local application and will draw upon the local needs assessment to do so. Good. I know you're writing. And as mentioned, this will be posted, so.
I remember things if I also write.
Gotcha, okay. That's understandable. So as Mindy mentioned, of course, in the RFA, so we're just referring to Appendix D in this one, of course, and the NA is part of the transition year, which this section is not required. So it's just a brief little explanation on just letting you know that for transition year, certain areas that are not going to be required. And then on Appendix E, which is the local application, so there are 10 requirements for the local application that will be listed for reference. The items are not required, of course, in the transition year, which will be marked as NA. And I'm going to be posting the 10 questions, and I'm going to give you all at least a couple seconds just to kind of read through them, since I know you all don't have the RFA in hand, and just to kind of have an idea of what these questions, entail of. I hope everybody can read it. It is a lot of content on some of these. If you all can't read that last C, because I know it's at the bottom, it says how students, including students who are members of Special POPs, will learn about their school's career and technical education course offering, and whether each course is part of a career and technical education program of study. And I'll move on to remaining ones. You can't read 4? So describe how the institution will improve the academic and technical skills of students participating education components of such programs through the integration of, can't read that, rigorous content aligned with challenging academic standards and relevant career and technical education programs to ensure learning in the subjects that constitute a well-rounded education. So as defined in Section 8101 of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1965. And then this is 5. So I'll move on to 6 and 7 and 8. And then I'll move on to 9 and 10. So you can see they're very detailed questions. That was the reason why we wanted to put them up there, so at least you all have an idea of what's to come for at least a local application. And then I will briefly just touch up on the new core indicators. So we had 6 core indicators of performance under Perkins 4. So it was a skill attainment, retention, completion, employment, and 2 for non-traditional students, participation and completion. So the new Perkins 5 core indicators essentially collapse these 6 Perkins 4 indicators into 3. And so I've posted the 3 with the definitions and the names of them as well. So instead of having the 6, no, it's all, the 3 just kind of collapsed in. And that last one is 3P1, which is non-traditional program enrollment, the percentage of CTE concentrators in career and technical education programs and programs of study that lead to non-traditional fields, for those of you that can't read that bottom part. Any questions before I turn it over to Dwayne to go into performance evaluation? I'm sure everything's like brewing right now for you all. Okay, so with that, I will turn it over to Dwayne to go ahead and go over the performance evaluation part.
Good morning. I want to talk about the performance improvement and evaluation plan. If you're familiar with the one in Perkins 4, it's very similar. The one that's listed in the RFA this year is really, as Mindy mentioned, has the entire implementation year information. So not only will you be filling it out for this year, but it'll be helping you to prepare for the actual implementation year application for next year. So this comes from section 7.4 in the RFA, and this is kind of important because throughout the section there will be a note that says transition year, refer to 7.4. So I'll show you the language from 7.4 that's really important. So again, in the implementation year, the applicant shall develop a performance improvement and evaluation plan for each of the 3 core indicators. And you'll need to demonstrate how Perkins funded programs, activities, and budget items that are identified for each core indicator will improve your performance toward meeting the state-determined target on the indicator. And you're also required to use grant funds toward improvement in each of the 3 core indicators as a primary purpose in the use of the funds. As I mentioned, there's a big footnote, bold, red, and just if we had flashing lights on the paper, it would be flashing. But it's basically during the transition year, the core indicator targets have not been established for this year. So whenever you read that, any part that says improvement of the core indicators, you will apply and evaluate the programs, activities, budget items, and strategies based on anticipated institutional goals. So even though we don't have statewide goals, you will need to have some provisional institutional goals on improving these 3 core indicators. Now, you know the definition of them. It's a percentage of students completing and non-traditional and everything like that. So you'll look at where you are now and then how you will improve in the future. Again, we don't have any quantitative analysis, but just to say you will either maintain or improve in the future for each indicator. And this is the part that kind of applies whenever you see an asterisk in the coming slides. This is the part that applies, that it's the local institutional goals, the anticipated goals. So again, the 2 parts are the performance improvement plan and the evaluation plan. So the performance improvement plan is to identify programs, activities, and budget items that will play a significant role in improving your performance on each core indicator. And how you will fill out this plan, again, very similar to the Perkins 4, is you will summarize how you will reach the approved state-determined target for each core indicator. Again, this is the language for the implementation year. Or if you already meet or exceed the target, how you will maintain a level of effort necessary to improve your performance. So even if you're meeting the state goals or your institutional goals, I'm almost certain that you will not be at 100% yet. But all of these improvement plan strategies will show how you will get closer to 100%, or in some cases closer to 50%, or just somewhere above where you are currently. So you will provide sufficient detail to demonstrate the specific challenges in improving your performance on the target, and how CTE programs, activities, and budget items in your application will make specific contributions toward meeting the state-determined target, or in the transition year, your anticipated institutional targets. Again, the parts of the performance plan include the key CTE programs and activities, and you will identify individuals, programs, activities that will play a significant role in meeting or exceeding the approved targets for each core indicator. There'll also be a section where you describe the specific budget items that will play a significant role in meeting the goals for each core indicator. And during the budget items section, we have in Appendix J a list of requirements for uses of funds, and Appendix I, and then cost guidelines in Appendix J. The former terminology in the RFA for Perkins 4 was allowable and permissible, or required and permissible uses of funds. In Perkins 5, they're described as requirements for uses of funds, and it includes examples. Institution may use funds to do A through T, or different lists. So these are the permissible uses of funds. And then, of course, using the grant guidelines to show what is, for all federal grants, what is and what is not permissible. And again, if you're citing the same programs, activities, or budget items for more than one core indicator, we don't want you to just copy and paste it. You need to specify how these are relevant for that particular core indicator, whether it's for retention or for the completion or for the non-traditional. So even though improving the percentage of completers will by necessity or by inference improve the completion of the non-traditional, we need to see specifically how the activities described will address specifically that core indicator. And just a note, I mentioned Appendix I and J. If you're used to the previous RFA and the appendix, I think previously Appendix H was the required uses of funds and Appendix I was the cost principles. But this year, because we have comprehensive local needs assessment as Appendix D, every appendix after that increased by one letter. So the local plan or the local application, which used to be Appendix D, is now Appendix E, and so on. So if you're referring back to a previous RFA, just remember to add one letter to the appendix. Okay, in addition to the performance improvement plan, you'll need to complete the evaluation plan. And the evaluation plan measures the effectiveness of Perkins-funded programs, activities, and budget items that you've described in the performance improvement plan. And again, these include 3 sections: the activities, the timeline, and the target measures. And then the fourth thing is that in your biannual and final reports, you will give an update on how you have advanced toward your target. So first we have the activities and strategies, and you will need to describe and identify, again, activities and strategies that will be used to meet or exceed the approved state-determined target for each core indicator. Again, the transition year, it'll be the institutional or anticipated institutional goals for each core indicator. The activities and strategies must align with key programs, activities, and budget items identified in the performance improvement plan. And each activity and strategy must be quantifiable in terms of output or preferably outcomes. and they must have evident connection to the improvement in the core indicator it supports. So you want to see something quantifiable like a percentage or a number or the completion of a project in your in these activities and strategies. And just as a note, this is very similar to previous RFA. If you have activities and strategies that extend the full length of the grant period, you must subdivide them into sub-activities or sub-strategies, and that will show incremental progress in completing the larger activities and strategies. Again, if you just have September 1 through August 31 as your timeline or as your period, then by the first quarterly or second or biannual report, you won't have anything to show because it hasn't been completed yet. So we need to break those out into either semesters or quarters or months just to show an incremental progress. Similarly, for the timeline, you need to identify the timeline for each activity and strategy, and it should be in a monthly, quarterly format, again, unless it extends the length of the program. And if it does extend the length of the program, you'll need to subdivide it into quarters, months, or semesters. Then also you have the target measures for the evaluation plan, and you will identify one or more target measures for each activity and strategy, and the target measure must clearly relate to that activity and strategy. It must be not a general, this will help improve our performance in this indicator. It'll have to be more specific to how it will help. And it must state the planned output or outcome toward the improved performance in the core indicator. Again, if it's like number of students served, percentage of students passing the final exam, whatever, it has to have some kind of indication of how that specific strategy addresses the core indicator. So you must base this on data that can be collected prior to submission of the final report. Again, the final report is written at the end of the grant period. So if you're doing a survey of students who graduate in August, that probably won't be completed until October or November. That data won't be able to be included in the final report. So you would need to have something that more closely matches the end of the timeline that matches the end of the grant period. So here's an example of what the performance improvement and evaluation plan looks like. Again, the RFA this year, very much like previous years, has several examples and several displays, illustrations on how these things will be filled out. So this shows an activity, again, that covers the entire grant period or the entire academic year for the timeline, and it shows how you just have one activity, but you can have two time periods that you will evaluate that activity during. So you'll have one for spring, and then one for fall, and then one for spring. And it also shows, again, this is the final product. At the end of the year, you'll have the biannual report, and it'll show the progress you made in the first section, in this case, the fall semester. And then the final report will show either just the spring semester or a accumulation of all of the year's data. Here's another example where you have an activity or strategy that extends the entire length of the year. And again, for that broad year-long activity, you would have a target measure, and again, the biannual and final reports, you will show how you have progressed at that point. But also, as you mentioned, you will need to subdivide that activity into two sub-activities. And in this case, you'll have one activity during the fall, which would be September through October. So you have one activity, which will be like the start of the project, which is getting the information together. And as you can see, that'll be completed by the time the first biannual report is ready. And then the second sub-strategy will be like a continuation or an extension of that first strategy. And it will begin in spring. It may go just for a month, or it might go for the whole semester. And you will have a different, a relevant target measure for that sub-activity. And again, you will have address your progress during the biannual report and final report for that sub-activity. And again, if the timeline is after the first biannual report is done, during the biannual report, you'll just say NA, not completed or not started yet, and you'll give the results in the final report. So again, like I mentioned, these are all, you have illustrations and demonstrations in the RFA to show how to fill out these applications. And again, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have, either on just this part or, as I said, this is pretty much the entire application. You have the local application that you'll fill out. It's very similar to the ones from before, but instead of 13, you only have 10. Unfortunately, the 10 are a bit more involved than they were before. And then you have the performance improvement and evaluation plan, very similar to the one from last year if you've done it before. And so that's basically the application you'll be submitting. And I think the deadline is by July. Do we have a deadline?
We've had a deadline projected of July 17th. To the extent that we release the RFA late, we will knock that deadline back a little.
So if you're thinking you have to go straight home, you should go straight home and start working on it tonight. But to the extent that you do have a little bit of breathing room before it's actually due. So that'll help. And if you have any questions now, or if you think of something on the way home or when you get back to your office, feel free, again, to email us, perkins@thecb.state.tx.us, or email either one of your program directors, and we'll help you with any questions you might have.
And let me just say this, if you email one of us at our individual email addresses, you're going to get a response in probably a quicker time frame than if you email the Perkins address. So I recommend that you first look to your grant advisor among the Perkins staff and just get your questions started there. And we work together to get questions answered if it's something one of us can't answer. And if I may, while we're in Q&A, say at the podium there, Dwayne, we're going to turn to our first questions from the webcast audience. Marissa?
So there's a question. It says, is there any chance for TEA and THECB to discuss the 70-30 split, considering the implementation of P-TECH and CTE-focused early college high schools throughout the state?
Yeah, as far as I know, this would probably be a good question to ask one of our legislators. This is at a much higher level. Again, our commissioner or assistant commissioner might want to get into meetings with this, but we know that when that split was first initiated, we screamed and railed against the storm, and nothing ever came of it. But hopefully, maybe this year, again with these added initiatives, maybe we can show some evidence for giving a little more funding to the higher education, post-secondary section of this. Again, we'll do our best. We're always advocating for this kind of change, but it's an uphill battle, I'm sure you know.
And I will add that this has been a point of discussion. And I don't know that TEA is opposed to the idea of changing the split. The discussion would take place a little bit above our pay grade, but I believe that if circumstances warranted a change in the split, and the case could be made that it would be a possibility. I will tell you that we're not actively discussing it now. For the coming year, we'll be at 70-30.
I think this is just a general question. It says, do early college high school students count towards the dual credit students population?
That is a question for our data people. I believe logically they would. Do we want to put that down as one of the questions we'll provide a follow-up answer to? Okay, let's make a note of that. Are there any questions from this audience on site? Let me go ahead and ask you all a general question. Is there any aspect of Perkins 5 that you're a little bit excited about, that you see some potential in?
Yes, that we now only have 3 indicators. That's what we're excited.
That streamlining of the core indicators is promising. And I would add to that the fact that we can now set state-determined targets for performance also holds promise. Anything else that you're really excited about? We have another question from our audience at a distance, and I will follow up with another question for you after that.
So this one states, can institutions use their program advisory boards to provide input for the needs assessment?
Yes, absolutely. That is one of your valid avenues for getting business industry stakeholder input.
And I think that's almost an expectation from our side that you will use those advisory committee.
And Joyce clarifies, and she's correct, this is not your only avenue. Business associations, local workforce board, you will know these in your SDA, but your advisory committees certainly should be consulted. Any other questions from a distance? Let me ask you all another question. What about Perkins 5 are you most nervous about at this point? Hand up.
Do you want to go ahead and get the mic?
Yeah, why don't we get the mic and start floating it as long as we're asking you guys questions?
Trying to find a way to identify everybody that's listed as a special pop. Because we either need to change our intake processes and some other things. And so I've been asking some other colleagues, can they identify all of those categories? And I know we at Temple College cannot. We're being proactive and looking at an intake form or something else, but then how do you code that in colleague, et cetera, et cetera?
Is anybody else dealing with this issue, looking forward to it, or looking forward to how you're going to deal with it? Anybody else want to comment about this? And we have a couple of mics that we can come to you with.
My one recommendation would be look at it now so that you can change things for August, because if you don't change things, you won't have that data captured for next year.
And these requirements for the new special populations categories have been added to the CBM reporting, and you received an email from our Strategic Planning and Funding Commissioner about that. That is going to be, there are new challenges for the coordinating board in this too. Gathering information on the military side of Core Indicator 2 and on the public service side are going to be a challenge for us. We're going to have to find a way to do that. We may need for you to help us with that in your CB 116s. We're all moving forward in this in ways that are challenging us. So thank you for that good concern. What else is concerning to you or presents you with a dilemma or a problem to solve, rather, at this point?
Not too sure.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
And those of you at a distance, we're dealing with mic issues.
Mic issues, of course. Sherry, for those of you at the distance, just quickly, we'll talk about it a little bit more in detail later, but we are going to be holding stakeholder meetings at the state level for organizations, advocates of those special populations, since we now have 9 categories of special populations, right?
Anything else at a distance or from you all locally, questions or comments? And then we'll take a break. Yes.
So I think the comprehensive local needs assessment actually is kind of a double-edged sword. It's kind of a scary animal, and you know, it's big and it has to have a lot of pieces and parts, but it can also help us build relationships with our stakeholders and can help us really hone in what we do so that we really are making a difference. So I'm sort of half excited and half nervous about the needs assessment.
The other concern that I have is that when we start to look at what a program of study, if it's defined to be mapped from high school to college, not all of our programs are mapped from high school, because some are not appropriate for high school. So.
And I can settle your mind on that, Dr. Williams. You are required to have a minimum of one statute-compliant program of study. You may, of course, have 20, and that will be good for everyone, but you are required to have a minimum of 1. And let me turn to your comment, too. You will be required to have ongoing consultation with your stakeholders. So the promise for building new networks of consultation toward alignment of your CTE programs with your stakeholders' needs, business and industry needs in particular, is rich. Anyone else? It is 11:30. We are ahead of schedule. We allowed plenty of time for questions. And so we will be able to take a little break now. Let us convene. Let's see. Why don't we take a 15-minute break? It may be that lunch will be here by then. If we reconvene at 11:45, and we still, what? A question. Where is our question? Okay.
And it's actually a comment.
Well, okay, please.
For those of you that are worried about special populations, if you have a WIOA Title II program, such as adult education, something along those lines, we've been having to track those for at least 4 or 5 years, with the possible exception of the over 55 age group. So they should have some intake advice or some tracking advice for those programs if you have any Title II operations going on at your location.
Anything else? Comments, questions? We will break until 11:45. In the meantime, I will find out about lunch. At 11:45, we'll reconvene, and we will either proceed with the next part of the presentation, or we will break and let you get your lunches. Okay, thank you. is three things. I will give a little bit of an overview of the coordinating board's work on the state plan development for the four-year state plan. Sherry Rannis will lead you in our inaugural stakeholder meeting toward developing a state plan. You all being the stakeholders, the very important stakeholders. And then third, we will have Q&A that is just open about anything that has been brought up this morning or any questions that may have arisen during the stakeholder discussion, anything. So that will be the order by which we'll proceed. Before we begin, though, Dr. Leslie Keeling-Olsen has asked to make a statement to you all about a matter that's been of interest to some of you. I'd like to acknowledge, too, that Leslie is the incoming president of TACD for the next academic year. So here, I give you Leslie.
Thank you, Mindy. Most of you know me. I'm Leslie, and for those of those y'all that are new, I'd like to say welcome. I know in the past we've had these orientations and there have been people in the room that were assigned Perkins 2 weeks ago, and they were a little nervous and scared. So over the years, I have developed some templates. I have a budget template, and I'm modifying my Perkins request template for the new Perkins. So if you would like those templates, I don't mind sharing them. I send them out to my CTE department chairs, and then that way they can tell me what's needed, but along with it, they can connect it to a core indicator. They can also tell me how they're going to measure it so that activities and things like that can come from that foundation. Additionally, I wanted to let you know TACD is TACD 2020. And so as you're writing your Perkins grant application, if you want to mark TACD down, there will be a pre-conference again this year, obviously very much related to what's going on in the local plan and needs assessment in special populations. It is April 1st through April 3rd, 2020 in Austin, Texas. Before I forget, for those of y'all that are also new, we have a Perkins listserv. And if anybody is not on the listserv and would like to be on the listserv, as we start writing, you'll see different people that will send out emails because they need job descriptions or they're wanting to know how people might be doing different things on the application. And so, as Mindy dubbed it a while back, it's the People's Perkins.
Perkins for the people.
Perkins for the people. So we try to help each other. If you're not on the listserv, if you'll let me know today, I'll actually email you and give you access so you can join the listserv. Thank you.
Okay, and we will move forward. I'd like to acknowledge and reinforce Leslie's invitation to get on the Perkins listserv. TACD has been kind enough to post Perkins materials on its website. Leslie has been a leader with TACD in kind of creating a community of once disparate colleges across the state operating Perkins programs, and it's a great advantage. And we like being able to work with TACD for the benefit of CTE in the state where it touches Perkins. I also want to acknowledge one more thing. Dwayne Hiller took the lead on developing our Perkins 5 RFA, that basic RFA that will be released in this coming week. It was a pretty steep job. Had to transform it for a new generation. And I think we've turned out a product that you'll find useful. I will say, though, that any typos are entirely Dwayne's responsibility. So. No, it was a team effort, but Dwayne really did the heavy lifting on the RFA, so I do want to acknowledge that. Okay, and that said, we will move forward. I'm going to talk a little bit about the state plan and the coordinating board's work in the plan. It's under development now. TEA is at work, and we have been in the planning stages for what we're going to do. We will soon be under the state plan, or the state transition plan for FY20. And work on the four-year state plan will be proceeding quickly over the coming period of time. And here you see kind of a timeline graphically illustrated of how everything will move forward. TEA, which is the lead on state plan development, since they are the eligible entity for receipt of Perkins funds for the state, they're the fiscal agent. TEA requested and received permission from the governor's office to submit a transition plan for 2019-2020. We've discussed that previously. The transition plan was submitted to the Department of Education on May 24th. It is pending approval. It will be in place by the time we begin the transition year in September. Coordinating board staff are planning statewide meetings now with stakeholders toward developing the post-secondary side of the four-year state plan that we'll submit to the Department of Ed with TEA in April 2020. So that's the target submit date. Now, beginning in August, you'll see on this timeline, we will conduct stakeholder outreach meetings. We'll begin those, as I said, yes, I did tell you in August, okay. Now, I'll talk more about these in a minute. Now, your input is going to inform development of the post-secondary side of the state plan. I will tell you further that a draft of the complete plan will be available in October for public comment. That is a statutory requirement. The plan will be submitted to the Department of Ed after the State Board of Education approves it, and that plan by statute must incorporate and reply to public comments. Now, during all this work, you guys will be working institutionally to get your transition year programs conducted and develop your comprehensive local needs assessments. And we'll be poised in August to move into our Perkins 5 transition year. Now, here are the state's required stakeholder consultations. And I won't read all of these to you, but you can read through the list. It's fairly extensive. And this outreach will be done in coordination with TEA. They've had their own secondary level listening tour going on for part of this year about Perkins 5 and other matters. TEA has taken the lead in consultation with secondaries, but you will have some of your own as part of your own local plan development. And here I'm going to just show you, and I don't know if this is visible, I hope the type is big enough, the required components for the state over the next 3 slides. And I'll let you review these as I point out some highlights. On this slide, you see reference to programs of study in 3 of the 7 bullets of the required state plan components on this page. Everywhere in the statute, there's a reference to a CTE program. It is followed by the words "and programs of study" as defined in the statute. It's a major feature of the Act, as we've discussed, and a requirement for receipt of formula funds, as we've discussed. And I will move on to yet more of the required state plan components and let you read these while I point out some highlights. More programs of study requirements in 3 of the bullets. There's a reference in bullet 3 to alignment of programs of study with the needs of the state. This is going to be your requirement also at the local level. Notice too in bullet 4, there's a requirement to ensure equal access for special populations. This as well will be your requirement at the local level. It's the state's responsibility, it's your local responsibility. And finally, the final set of required components for the state plan. Consistently with the previous bullet, bullets 1 and 6 here require the state to improve outcomes and reduce performance gaps for CTE concentrators, including special populations, and to have program strategies for special populations. This is a state requirement, and it will be carried forth in large part by post-secondary institutions. Dual credit is referenced in bullet 3, consistent with the secondary, post-secondary workplace pathway required for programs of study. So these are our requirements at the state level. Now, here's how we will approach this. This is kind of our roadmap for stakeholder concentration. We plan to hold 2 statewide association meetings here at the coordinating board later this summer. One for post-secondary professional organizations. Leslie, we have TACTI on this list. Another for special populations groups that do advocacy and support. Special populations, well, let me just put it this way. Associations that provide advocacy and support for special populations groups. We will have convening of those state-level associations as well. Now, we'll also hold 6 or more likely 8 stakeholder meetings across the state. We're preparing to reach out to some institutions to ask them to host us to do this. We'll have consultations with the kinds of constituencies you see listed here. Local employers, community associations, workforce boards. We want to talk to parents and students. We want to talk to CTE faculty. And we want to talk to CTE administrators and Perkins directors. So that is going to be, in large part, our stakeholder outreach. We will, during this, be writing our parts of the state plan to contribute to what TEA will turn in later this summer. And I will ask you to hold questions right now as we move forward into the next part of this part of our day. We will have general Q&A before we proceed with the afternoon's discussions. However, now I'd like to introduce Dr. Sherry Rannis. Sherry is going to lead our inaugural, our first stakeholder consult with you all.
Thank you, Mindy. Well, as you're all digesting your sandwiches, hopefully had some caffeine, some iced tea. As Mindy said, this is our first discussion in public about the post-secondary portion of the Perkins statewide plan, and our first opportunity to have a group discussion. Suggests that I need to know what I'm doing on this one. Any help? Which one? I know, that's weird. Okay, good. Okay, excellent. Alrighty. So what we want to do in the next 30 or 40 minutes with you all is solicit your comments on the following questions that we've composed that concern the development of the Perkins statewide plan. And these questions are pretty high level, pretty generic, general, and they're composed from the point of view of what the state is going to do, as what the state's responsibilities are, what the states can do. And it's our requirement, our obligation to ask stakeholders to help us figure out what the state can do. So that's what this conversation is about. So what I'm going to do, this is the way we're going to proceed. We only have about 5 questions. I'm going to read the formal question, and then I'm going to add some explanation of what we think we're really trying to ask about. And then I'm going to ask you all to give us a sense of whether or not the question is pretty clear or not. Would you be able to restate the question or explain it to a colleague? Can you identify like what the gist of what we're driving at? And, or are these questions off? Do they need to be retooled, recalibrated a bit? This is the kind of advice we would really, really relish from you all. And of course, if you'd like to comment and respond to the question, have an answer to the question itself, that would be terrific. All right, so are we up for this? We have 5 questions. We can tool through these. As I said, I'm going to read you the question first. Okay. All right, question 1. What? Yes, please. Whoever wants to do it. Terrific. Yes, and also I'm going to say we have an audience who's available to, which we're hoping will engage with this process, but for those of you who are listening from a distance, we're monitoring our email and we will read questions out loud or responses out loud or whatever comment you'd like to make. So please do use your email function and we'll be able to incorporate your thoughts as we go along. We'll also, of course, look at those at the end of the orientation and follow through with them. Okay, first question. How can the state, and you'll see a lot of that, how can the state help facilitate collaboration in the development and coordination of CTE programs and career pathways? That is, how can the state support effective and meaningful collaboration between secondary schools, post-secondary institutions, and employers? And so if I were to sort of briefly just restate that, what does effective and meaningful collaboration between secondary schools and post-secondary institutions and employers look like? And is there a role for the state in facilitating that kind of collaboration? And if so, what does that entail? What does that collaboration look like? So, first question to y'all. Is it a question that is understandable, that's pretty clear? Can I see some nods, or maybe raise a hand? Raise your hand if you think that you think the question's reasonably clear. Okay. For those of you who didn't, that have already got one person, you can go over to the podium, or you can grab someone with a microphone and respond. How would you like? What kind of clarification, or what kind of retooling, or what kind of issue do you have with the question? Go right ahead, Joyce. Oh, unfortunately, the folks back who are listening online can't hear you unless you take a mic. So. Yeah, that works. Good.
My question would be is how can you, as a coordinating board representing the state, how can you do that? Are you setting that question up and that's not something you can deliver? So my thing is, how would you do that?
So how to operationalize that question would be an issue.
If you're going to talk to stakeholders and you're asking them, how can the state help you? And they give you the answers of this is how you can help us. I'm asking, how can you do it?
Because you're thinking that there are limitations to what role we can play or that we should play.
I do know that there are limitations to roles that you can play.
Right. Indeed, there are.
Especially if you're talking secondary and post-secondary institutions that you don't govern.
So should the question include some acknowledgement of those limitations, Joyce? Would that make it better?
I don't know. I don't know if you would, how you would restrict that to something that is within your control or within your authority to do, being able to ask that question that way. But what I don't want to happen is that you are meeting with stakeholders that are statewide stakeholders or groups, and then you make promises or commitments to them, and you commit the colleges with unfunded mandates. Oh, there are several examples. That's why they're smiling.
Okay.
Unfunded mandates that could happen that you can't commit us to or shouldn't commit us to.
Right.
So things like that.
So if we limited, do other folks agree with Joyce? Raise your hand if you think that the question should be retooled a little bit. Yeah, along that line. One way we could do that is to talk really, or to ask the question about what effective collaboration between sectors or segments of the education pipeline look like, education and workforce pipeline look like for you, those of you locally, those of you regionally, those of you statewide, the perspective on that collaboration. And then some speculation about what that state role would be. So it would be a little bit pulling back a little bit from, like, tell us what the state can do, and we'll hash it out right here, because that's actually not at all what this is about. But it's about discovering from the field the parameters, the scope of the work that we might have to think about and put into the state plan, describe in the state plan. Does that sound better? Did you have a comment? Anybody have an additional comment on question 1? Anyone have a response to question 1? Do you feel inspired? Do you feel fire? Or you want to say what you think? What you think about that question? What your answer would be? Oh, you guys are reticent. How about our folks online? Anybody?
I mean, we have some questions, but I think they're more like general.
They're not about this particular. No. Okay, fine. That's good.
I have a point.
Oh, there's one right here, and there's one right over here.
I think you'll get a lot of comments regarding dual credit. And it goes back to what Joyce is saying, then really can we do? Mm-hmm. There's some schools who want to play with us, and there's some schools who want to play with others, and building that pipeline is not always up to us. So anyway, that's what I feel that you will get, that the majority of conversation with stakeholders statewide will be about dual credit, the P-TECH academies, early college, high school. Why can't we have one? It's going to be that opposed
It's going to be those kinds of the mechanisms.
Really focus on career and technical education and providing educated employees for our workforce.
Thank you. That's great advice. And one over here and then one over there.
Yes, Rudy Sandoval, Central Texas College. By state, perhaps I'm assuming that it doesn't necessarily mean the coordinating board. It could mean the TEA and the Workforce Commission as well?
It could. I mean, one of the things that we're being pushed to do, which I think is incredibly admirable through the state plan, is the collaboration, coordination, increasing between our 3 sectors, our 3 agencies. Yeah. So it could go into that direction, absolutely. Over here.
I just have a little bit of a comment. When you're talking about pathways and career pathways, a lot of that conversation is also happening with the state strategic plan and the regional groups.
Yes.
With the workforce involved and the high schools or the K through 12 and then the universities too. That might be a good opportunity instead of recreating more collaborative groups to find more information from.
That's a really wonderful idea. Are you all familiar with the state regional work that's going on that's actually sponsored through the THECB? It's a very ambitious but really wonderful opportunity to think about progress at K-12, post-secondary, and workforce working together on a regional level to increase strategic outcomes, pick strategic outcomes, and go forward. The part of it that I wonder about, because I'm actually involved in it myself right now, and I'm excited about it, working in El Paso, is the workforce breakout of it, which is sometimes glossed over a little bit. What I love about the Perkins program is that laser-like focus on workforce, which is so incredibly important. But I think you're right. I think that there should be hopefully overlaps, and those should be points of information for us as we go forward. Thank you so much. Any other comments on question 1? No, not? Yeah, back here. It's Leslie again. Where did the mic go?
I think there's
still one on the podium, Leslie.
I think before you get to deciding how to facilitate collaboration, I think it's an examination of what barriers do you face. In developing program of studies, I currently only have 1 and I'm building more,
right.
But there's been trying to overcome all of those barriers. Some of a little bit about what you talked about, but then also there's a disconnect between the CTE classes and what the TEKS, and when they rewrote the TEKS.
Right.
So some of those things might be a good starting point of barriers and issues before we come to this.
Great point. We have an online question.
It's not a question, more of a comment, and it is from Diane from Odessa, and she says, I think it would be helpful for parents were required to be part of the student's career pathway selection. And she did kind of mention it would be more for middle and high school students.
Interesting. Parents are actually, again, as you saw previously in Mindy's description, one of the major stakeholder groups that we're all supposed to consult, and we feel like we have to include parents as well to the extent it's possible. Good point. Very good point. Okay, I'm going to go on to question 2. How can the state help promote continuous improvement in academic achievement and technical skill attainment in CTE programs? So, unpacking this a little bit. In your opinion, what drives improvement in academic achievement and technical skill attainment in CTE? And can the state play a role promoting improvement in CTE programs? And if so, what does that look like? So once again, another question, but again, about a slightly different take on the domain here, right? We're talking about academic progress and technical skill achievement. We're talking about the heart of our mission at our institutions. How many of you think this question is pretty clear? Raise your hands. Only a handful. Okay. For those of you who don't think it's very clear, could you repeat back to me what you think this means? And perhaps we can try to tease out a better way to talk about it. Anybody willing to take a stand against? We're kind of in an informal classroom, online and offline hybrid situation. Come on, students. Okay, Joyce is going to start.
I don't want to be a nemesis, but I'm just asking, kind of doing the devil's advocate here. Does this mean more accountability standards and performances that are going to be put on us? And the reason I'm just asking is because if you're talking about promote continuous improvement of academic achievement, it sounds more like accountability. It sounds more like reports. It sounds more like performances. We have a lot of that already going on in CTE.
Right.
For example, the marketable skills initiative that's there. Most colleges that have CTE programs already felt that we have scans that's there, marketable skills, and was said, oh no, that's not scans. And so now we have to do that. The block program, we had to institute that, had to do a report on that, never got data from that. So I'm just asking if we're talking about putting more standards that are already there, or asking the question and looking at standards and accountability and reports and all of those performances that we already have,
right,
to see if they're meeting the continuous improvement that's already there instead of asking. So I'm just
so interesting. I'm glad you pointed this out. Excellent.
If you're asking us to do more of the stuff that we think we already do, but then you change it because it's a general education process like marketable skills really is, and so I'm just...
No, that sounds like a response, actually, to the question, which I really appreciate. And you went immediately to accountability and standards in your interpretation of the question, which is really interesting, because the question doesn't mention any of those things, does it? When I was thinking about it casually, I went to another place. I was thinking about the ability of the board or other agencies, or the tri-agencies for that matter, to convene, or being able to put in more incentives, potentially even success points, changes around these kinds of improvements, or trying to provide incentives or build incentives or create incentives. That's kind of where I went, but I think that's a really interesting response, and it could provide some resistance to this notion of getting deeply involved in the academic and technical side of stuff. But anybody have any other thoughts? Because this one, you all looked a little puzzled as I was trying to read faces back here.
I was just curious, for the technical skill attainment, is that part of the 1P1 data that was originally requested for Perkins 4?
That's a really good question. I don't know, Mindy, do you have an answer for that? I don't know that it was.
This question doesn't pertain specifically to that old Perkins 4 skill attainment. The new Perkins 5 puts emphasis on the attainment of credentials, but not interim skill attainment. We would have to ask for an interpretation of that from Ed. We are not sure how this might be different from what we're already doing with credentials attainment. I think that is how we will interpret this question.
But thank you for pointing that out. Any other reactions, burning need to answer the question or respond to the question, which we also appreciate so much. Do we have any external questions dealing with this? No. Okay. Last call. Question 2. Gretchen?
I guess this is both in response to the question and sort of about the question as well. The first thought in answer to the question that came to my mind was money.
Well, sure.
And so I guess, are you prepared for that? Because we get what we get. And
Right.
So, I mean, I get that Perkins is an opportunity for us to rethink and get additional funds to target certain areas. But I think we could all spend more money than we currently have, especially with some of the technical programs that require very expensive equipment. And so it would not surprise me if a lot of the responses you got to this were around resources and funding.
Thank you for that comment. Any additional ones? Okay, we're going to move into question 3. How can the state assist in the goal of improving outcomes and reducing performance gaps for CTE concentrators, particularly special populations? So the goal, I mean, that is the whole point of Perkins, right? The goal of reducing performance gaps and outcomes among CTE students is a primary concern for our Texas Perkins State Plan. And so what kind of assistance would matter for your students? That's the kind of question we would ask. What kind of assistance would matter for your students, particularly those in the Perkins Special Populations categories? And once again, what can the state do to remove or reduce those challenges faced by students, especially those special populations? And here are the special populations. Lord God Almighty. That's Perkins 5's 9 categories of special populations, as per the statute. And so the question is, the goal of reducing performance gaps and outcomes, what kind of assistance do your students need? What kinds of barriers and challenges are they facing? Is that a clear question? Those of you who think it's a clear question, can you raise your hand? Not everyone thinks, is that the clear question? Okay. So for those of you who didn't think it was a clear question, sure. Oh, the very last one is a youth with a parent who is a member of the armed forces and is on active duty.
Sherry, and I think we got a question in reference to the previous one.
Oh, really? Okay, it's a little bit of a delay.
It says, I'm not sure I'm clear on the response provided. Is technical skills attainment currently included into the Perkins 5 2P1 as part of the transition year?
It's included only in that the attainment of technical skills is a prerequisite to acquiring a post-secondary credential. It is not a standalone and discrete marker of performance by itself.
I think of the question is this attempt to, which is always difficult for all of us, right? To describe the workforce instruction enterprise, right? Which is both an academic and a technical skill acquisition, right? And so that's why I think it's mentioned there, but I find it really interesting that it's triggering all of you to think about the indicators. That term technical skill. All right, going back to question 3, which is about special populations and the barriers and kinds of assistance that you all think that would improve the outcomes of those students, particularly your CTE students, particularly those in special population groups. We'll be having these statewide meetings of associations and advocacy groups that represent these 9 different groups, which I think is one way to get at it. But when we get to our regional meetings, when we come near you or to your hometown in the next number of months, we also want to meet with people in your vicinity who are either members of these special population groups or represent them or work with them. And we'll be asking similar questions like, what do you need that's not there? What would you like to have that you don't have? What barriers and challenges seem to be so significant that things that were being put forth are not helping enough? That kind of question, and have a conversation about it. But in our conversation right now, just wondering if there's a way to make that question clearer, since so many of you didn't think it was. Sure. How can the state assist in the goal of improving outcomes and reducing performance gaps for CTE concentrators, particularly those in special populations? Right down there.
I'm not sure I have a suggestion of how to make the question clearer, but I've had a couple of thoughts I'm bringing from my institution about
Please.
this. One thing that was mentioned earlier was the struggle I think a lot of us are going to have on collecting this data fully. So if I was going to answer this question directly, I'd say, please help us identify best practices in making sure that everybody who's in the special populations are counted. The second, I guess, just comment that I have that we're thinking about is a lot of us, whether by our geographical location or our mission, I mean, this is who we're serving, the special populations. So we're thinking about how much sense it makes to compare their achievement against maybe a smaller population of non-special pop students. I mean, does that even make
I see your dilemma.
sense?
That's right. That's right.
Or is it, could it be, I think one thing that we always concentrate on is improving the performance against itself, right?
That's right.
Just
That would be the answer, I
rather
think.
than comparing it to a smaller statistical
Right.
group. Those are just some thoughts we've been pondering.
Very, very good point. I'm so glad you pointed that out. That's right. If you are a majority ESL, for example, or whatever particular special population, I know a number of our campuses have very high military enrollment, or youth who are involved in military families. Yeah, I mean, you shouldn't try to compare some mythical comparison or sample. You should compare to yourselves and the improvement goals that you have for yourself, which is the underlying Perkins anyway. Question right over here. Mindy, do you want to hand the microphone over to this lady right here? Thanks. By the way, we're being joined by one of the members of, actually our assistant commissioner for strategy, policy, and funding, statistical expert, Julie right there.
And you're probably interested to know that we're working with
That's right. We have an amazing staff of data folks who both do analysis as well as collection, and Julie's team is really outstanding. They're already trying to figure out, we'll learn more about this from Mindy in a few minutes, but we are really going to try to help you out as much as possible on this. And what I love about Julie and her team is they're quite creative. If some of the standard data reporting that you all do doesn't quite get at some of these 9 special populations, they're actively figuring out ways to get that data. So, please.
I know this is for the state plan, the questions that you're asking, but following that state plan, we're going to have local plans.
That's
Not
right.
one question that you've asked are on that special POPs list. Are those people going to be able to understand what you're talking about? So especially parents, a CTE concentrator, what is that?
Right.
So that's the kind of stuff, when you come to those regional meetings, they're going to need to be able to understand what question you're asking them, or you're not going to get anything. You're not going to get attendance.
Wonderful, wonderful feedback. Thank you so much. And I'm glad you're confirming what we've actually thought about too, is that you don't give folks this high level question. It's not exactly meaningful.
We'll be customizing our question sets to our audiences. I know what you speak of as a veteran of the community college system and student populations. So yes, these would not be questions that we would ask students or their parents necessarily to address. Okay,
Absolutely.
I think Dwayne has
Dwayne, did you have someone? Yes.
Yes.
Hi.
You know, we don't really know exactly on some of these special pops what we have in our areas. And so it would be, at this point, very good to really look at how to give us that data back, especially regionally, so that we can see, you know, if our folks are actually traveling to other locations to work or, you know, getting jobs in our case, it's the Metroplex.
Right.
But again, if you're going to meet also with some of these groups that we may not be meeting with because we're not tracking these types of special pops, it'd be great to have some best practices or some type of thing that would help us to assist these students that we may not have had really any input on because of the new changes.
I think you're giving, again, tremendous feedback. And one of the elements of what you said was also that, and responding to you as well, providing examples of what we're talking about might be really helpful, but also actual data and best practices feedback in the process. Terrific. I think we have some out of space and out of room comments. One second.
Just one question. For special populations, does this include ex-convicts, individuals with felonies, et cetera?
Pardon? Not explicitly.
Special populations group, no. But there is attention on the part of the legislature to address that population. I don't see it discreetly marked out in Perkins, but it's an area of advocacy and periodic focus of legislative bodies.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of legislative interest in Texas. Yes.
Two things. Number one, the last two bullets on there for the special populations say youth. Assuming that youth is 24, if you have somebody who's 25 and comes in and says, I'm a foster care survivor, you can't count them, right?
Mindy's going to answer, but my answer to you is in Texas will make that determination. Is that right, Mindy? What a youth is, the definition of youth.
We will make that determination, but I can tell you that you do have students who have aged out of the foster care system. I believe you have to be 17 years of age and a high school graduate to attend college in Texas. Am I right about that? Joyce, you know everything. Am I right about that? Yes, don't you have to be a minimum of 17 years of age or an emancipated minor? Somebody remind me what the 85th legislature did. In any case, you do overlap with the youth population in your post-secondary population. So that term is applicable here to a degree to you. And the same for youth with a member of the armed forces. Now, you know, how to collect that information, because in post-secondary those things are voluntarily disclosed, that's another matter. But you do have a Venn diagram, secondary, post-secondary, and youth kind of overlaps for post-secondary in that question. Does that answer your question, Juanita?
Oh.
Okay, restate the question.
Ask again.
That can you count somebody who is 25, 30, who is a survivor of foster care, or is 25 and has a military parent?
I will tell you that we have not yet defined youth for purposes of these questions, but you are making it clear to us that we'd better do so.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for that question. It was excellent. Any additional thoughts, or I don't think we have any. Do we have any external questions on question 3? Okay. Now we're going to go to question 4. We're almost done, folks. All right, this one's as open-ended as they come. How can the state help expand and ensure equal access to CTE for those special populations? And so basically we're asking this: what does equal access to CTE mean to you? What does it look like? And what powers the expansion of equal access in CTE? What creates that ability to improve access? And lastly, of course, the traditional our tagline this afternoon, what can the state do to support that expansion and ensure that equal access? So is that question reasonably clear? I'm now, notice how I'm ratcheting down my criteria now. Reasonably clear, show your hands. Yeah, again, about half of you think it's pretty clear. Okay, what can we do to fix it? What can we do to make it a little bit more clear? I think the idea of actually asking people what equal access means to them, I think is really pretty important. I've got recognizing a member of the audience.
I think it goes back to what I said earlier. You can't expand and ensure until you know what are all the issues and barriers related to it.
Right. So the first question is supposed to be about issues and barriers, and the second one is supposed to be about, I guess, doubles down on equal access, I guess, and what that means and how to create it.
And I think I go back to my friend who has stepped out of defining who the state is, who are the players, because really some of these would be great for the co-board and TEA and TWC to answer because of all the different initiatives, and in many ways, in certain areas, we compete and we don't share, and that agency provides services and they need it so they can check that box, meet that indicator, and it's not something that we're in it together.
So maybe that's actually, in some ways, I think of your comment as a response. You're basically telling us, hey, get your act together and collaborate, and indicate that you're going to collaborate so we can call for you to collaborate more. Yeah. Next question, Joyce, or comment?
Comment. Now, this one, to me, does speak to money and resources.
Okay.
If you're talking about providing equal access to students who have disabilities because of adaptive equipment that's going to be needed and other things for CTE programs.
Okay, good point. It's a very large part of what the state's role is. I'm comment in the back.
I guess I get caught up on the word equal. Because when you look at some of the special populations, a lot of it is self-report. So if I'm self-reporting or not, how does equal access play into that? Maybe take the word equal out and look at access or equitable or something because the word equal, I think, is a little bit misleading.
Very good point. Thank you so much for pointing that out to us, and I agree with you. Other comments? Responses, burning answer? What can the state do? It'd be perfectly logical to say, go all in or go all out, folks. Any other questions or responses from the field, from outside? No? Okay, we're going to go on to question 5. All right, this is actually one of the major mandates of the state plan. It's asking how we can keep not only in contact and get sort of your feedback now, but how we can continue to do so as the plan is developed, while it's implemented, and as it continues. What can we do to keep you guys involved and consulted in the planning, development, implementation, and evaluation of CTE in Texas? What can we do to keep you guys involved? And here, speak, if you would. I think the question is pretty darn clear. I hope it is. and so, initial thoughts or responses, what would it take for you personally, or you and your colleagues at your institution, to stay involved? What can we do to keep you involved?
I guess for me, I think you're all in this room. I think you're almost preaching to the choir,
right?
And so I think we are very involved. I know I'm involved, and the deans that report to me are very involved. So I think this is really a better question. Is a question for those other stakeholders: the parents, the students, the special populations themselves, because that's, I think, where we need the input better. Because I think we're very involved. And I don't know how I could be more involved,
Okay.
at the local level,
Right.
in the local level. So that's kind of my initial thoughts, is that this is really more of a question for the stakeholders outside of higher ed than it is those of us within higher ed.
Fair enough. That's a really good point. We, in fact, will come after you if you're not involved, right? We have our ways and means. Any other comments about this particular question? We'll go on to the last one, unless there's something from outside. I don't think there is. Okay, we're going to go to the last question. Okay, so what didn't we ask? That's the last question. Are there questions about the state plan that you would have liked me to read to you, ask you about, that we didn't ask? Did we forget to ask something important? Something that really kind of bugs you that we missed it? Any thoughts? Nope. Online? Might have to wait for our colleagues out there in the ether.
And of course, if you have any thoughts about this as you're driving or flying home later today,
That's right.
share them, please.
Here we go.
We do want to know what else you think we should hear from you about.
Okay, here's one respondent.
Just a comment, Joyce and I were just looking at something. As y'all were talking about the foster care, do we need to possibly stay in kind of guidance with what the education code says? Because the age limit on the education code for foster care tuition and fees is 25.
That would be a starting point for a definition.
That's probably where we'll start. Yeah. If you don't mind, I'll just summarize what you just said, Angelica. She said that that students must activate by 25. It's not that they must actually, and then they can use it for the rest of their duration of their career, their school career. Which again, these are complex and nuanced statutes, so thank you for the clarification. Anything else we should be asking you all? I should be asking your colleagues. Okay. Yes.
My only thought about that last question is to kind of tweak it slightly, and rather than saying, is there anything else we should ask, is there anything else you want us to know?
Anything else we want us to know, right?
And because I don't know what I should ask you to ask me, but I have something.
Well said.
But I have something that I really want you to know that you didn't ask, and so
Right.
I don't know, that might elicit more I think wording it that way might elicit a little bit more feedback than asking, what should we have asked?
Thank you very much for that. I mean, the purpose of this consultation is to learn, right? So it is indeed what we need to know, or we would like to know, and what you all would like to know. So it's a transaction that way. Well, thank you very, very much for your collaboration. Do we have anything from outside? I don't think we do right now. Okay. All right. We're going to very quickly switch to our last sort of format here. And where are we? Yes. Okay. Mindy, can I have I feel like I stuck behind a read. All right. So we've thrown a lot of stuff at you already. I mean, a lot. We know it. And Perkins 5 itself is got all kinds of somewhat, hopefully being demystified, but very sort of dense pieces to it. And as you've been sitting here and listening and looking at our slides, and I think, Wednesday when you have the RFA in hand, this will be even a better question. But the question right now is, are there any things that are sort of burning in your mind, or questions you put in your pocket during this session so far, this day so far, that you'd like to ask right now? And we'd like to give some time. Yes.
How is the Perkins plan going to fit into the 60-30?
All right, and in this question, all four of us are going to respond in different ways. So Mindy, the question here, the first question was, how is Perkins 5 fitting into 60 by 30? And one thing I will tell you is our goal here at the board has been to more clearly tie Perkins to 60 by 30, and the very first iteration of that was in our state leadership grants, where we declared we wanted 60 by 30 consonant proposals.
And I'll just add to that statement with, general affirmation of that. 60 by 30 text gets a lot of press over on the academic side, over on the transfer side. CTE has always been important to the state's performance in post-secondary, and it is becoming even more important. It is increasingly emphasized. It is the employment sector of the future. One of our goals is to raise the profile of CTE and its critical presence in making the state plan's goals. The strategic plan's goals. We will be looking at ways to direct program dollars in leadership and through reserve specifically toward achieving the goals of 60 by 30 techs. Everything you all do links into 60 by 30 techs, and we want you to tell us about it on that 10th question of the local application.
I mean, this is a burning topic for us. It's incredibly important that I know you feel like you're being buffeted by a lot of requests, a lot of different kinds of program. But within this building, 60 by 30 is the override. That is our goal. That is our strategy. And as Mindy said, I think the last time I looked at this, I haven't seen the 2018 figures, but the 2017 figures were running something like 35% of degrees are contributed to 60 by 30's outcome. They're coming from CTE or coming from workforce. So, I mean, we're vital, not just vital, we are necessary and should grow that number as much as possible. 2018, actually, enrollments are dipping a little bit, but it looks like that number is sustained, if not a little higher. It's my understanding, but we lost Julie, so we can't say that for certain. Other burning questions? Oh, there we go.
Juan Garza from TSTC. With regards to reallocation money and core indicators for Perkins 5, are they going to be tied to priority indicators as we move forward into Perkins 5?
That's a very good question. Thank you, Juan. This year, we will do merit-based reallocation again. We will do the last reallocation based on 2P1, 3P1, and 4P1 under Perkins 4. We will have our last data for those core indicators. In the implementation year 21, we will return to formula-based reallocations. Everyone will get a piece of that reallocation. And let me just give a little background. We went to performance-based reallocations as one means, among several, to encourage better focus on improving core indicator performance. And it has had its effect. I believe on this last reallocation, we gave reallocations to 44 out of 52 Perkins districts. And we started out in the 20s. I mean, you all come through, and the reallocations have shown it. But until we have something to indicate that we should return to performance-based reallocations, we will go back to formula. So you may expect that in 21. Thank you very much.
Good question. Excellent question. Other things? Points of curiosity, things that we haven't mentioned yet. By the way, this is such a different Perkins basic orientation than we've had for many, many years. For those of you who are veterans, you're nodding. And so we expect that, you might be feeling like you're missing things. We want to assure you when the RFA comes out in the next couple of days, we're standing ready, and you'll hear more about the resources we've got for you in a few minutes from Mindy. But any things, this is fair game, another 5 or 10 minutes. Anxiety, a worry, a puzzle, anything? Okay, I don't think we have anything from out of the building. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. Thank you very, very much for your feedback and your honesty. And again, invite you to continue to interact with us with additional questions occur to you or responses to some of the things we talked about around the state plan. That state plan is a living, breathing document. It's going to be our set of guidance and rules for 4 years. But it's going to be pretty high level, and I think it's really wonderful that pretty much everybody in the state who's a stakeholder is hopefully going to have some input into it. But we mean sincerely that we want your input. So thank you. Oh, right here.
I'm sorry for this delayed reaction, but I kept sitting here saying, should I not? I've been coming for quite a while, several years now, and I remember my first time coming, you all gave an example of what you all did not want as far as the local plan and what you expected to see, and it was sort of like a long dissertation, and then you gave us sort of what you were looking for when we submitted the proposal. So I guess my question is, how detailed, looking at the 10 questions are very, very detailed. How much detail are you wanting? Are you wanting a dissertation or what? Just kind of give us some feedback on that, I guess.
We want everything you can tell us that is relevant to the question and your local program. We don't need for you to keep it brief. Perkins 5, in fact, invites you to be more specific and more elaborative. And those styles vary from school to school. Here's what I'm going to tell, one thing I'm going to tell you that we absolutely need: paragraphs. I remember that example, Cheryl. It was an unparagraphed and a paragraphed local plan. It is impossible to read 5 pages of text that occur in one paragraph. We want you to do 2 hard returns between every intended paragraph. That will get us to it in paragraphs. But do you need to keep it under a certain amount of words? That would be to keep your own thought process and your own ability to explain your own good work under wraps. So no limits, okay?
Yeah, and no debits or credits for length, okay? But we do want you to be able to fully explain the plan that you've spent so much time developing. So with that, go ahead. Do you want to go ahead, Mindy? I think with that, we're going to move on to our next session.
We're a little bit ahead of schedule. Do we need to take an after lunch break and stand up and stretch, and we don't need recess? Okay. We will get out of here a little early, perhaps. I'm going to talk about the comprehensive local needs assessment. If you need to move about the room, step out and take a break, whatever you need to do, please feel free to do so. And as you refresh coffee and the like, I will move forward into this discussion. Comprehensive local needs assessment. Projected means of submitting the comprehensive local needs assessment. We're discussing exactly how we will handle this, but we are pretty sure we won't be asking you to tell us all about it in the portal. You're going to need too much room. You're going to need tables and graphs we project. We're thinking now that we may ask for some combination of submission of your comprehensive local needs assessment through the secure documents portal or to the Perkins email address. Okay, so let me just kind of launch into this. You know what to do with the 21 basic application. It'll be due ahead of the 21 basic application. We haven't decided on a due date sequence, but we would like to see your local plan before we see your application. It'll be the basis of your application and all your related budget requests. You must provide, as we've already said, for and Perkins funding for initiatives to address special populations. You need to justify your equipment and programmatic expenditures based on labor market data. And So I won't beat that horse anymore. Let's move on to the next slide and look at what you are required to do in your local stakeholder consultations. You see representatives you're required to talk to. They're pretty much the same as representatives of stakeholder groups that we're required to talk to. So I'll just let you read them there. And as I mentioned a little while ago, you actually are required to have ongoing consultation. That's statutory. As you move forward with your local plan and as you retool what you do toward Perkins 5, some bases for consultancy with stakeholders suggested by the Act include alignment of programs of study with workforce needs, identifying work-based learning opportunities, and ensuring that Perkins funding is used in coordination with other local resources. You're by and large doing this already, and you've got your community connections. You will be kind of documenting and formalizing these as part of your Perkins program with your ongoing consultations. And now I'm going to show you over the next 2 slides topics that you'll be required to address in your comprehensive local needs assessment. You'll need to evaluate student performance, including special populations, in light of the new established core indicators, core indicator targets. You'll need to disaggregate data for special populations groups. I see at least one person going, oh yeah. It is a requirement of the statute. We are going to try to help you with this, as I will show you in a minute. And recognizing the limits of colleges to obtain these data. You'll have to show that your CTE programs are sufficient in size, scope, and quality, and that they align with workforce needs. You may need for us to define what we mean by size, scope, and quality in order for you to be able to do that. And I see nods. And I think that's fair. It's a national debate what size, scope, and quality is right now, actually. It means different things to different states. But you need to have a kind of a concrete understanding of what we mean, I think. Further required CL&A components. You'll show how you're implementing CTE programs of study, emphasized there. That's as statutorily defined as we've talked about today. And CTE programs don't fall under that program of study category. And you'll recruit and maintain CTE faculty and instructional support personnel and provide professional development for them. You will try to include, as you already do, individuals from underrepresented groups. That's a statutory requirement, and you will show how you do that and what your intentions are in that area. And here you see broken out for local programs. The state level requirement to provide equal access, there's that word equal again, to all students, including special populations. Who was it who suggested that the term equal was kind of problematic? That person standing up back there, Miss, who shall not be named, who, okay, thank you, Kim Moslinier. That equal is a problematic term. It's a statutory term. And equal access does not necessarily mean that the numbers are equal. I think it may be construed as meaning equitable. There is no quota system implied here in that term equal. But you must be making things available equally. And, you know, that can be problematic depending upon whom the special population group is. It's a very pragmatic issue with disabled students. They need to have accessible routes of travel. They need to have access to the second floor, et cetera, et cetera. It can be very straightforward with a deaf student. They need an interpreter. They need some of the assistive technology. But, you know, students with economic disadvantages, single parents, what do you do to ensure that they have equal access? I mean, we know that you on the ground floor, you know, troops on the ground here, are the ones who are going to enact this requirement all over the state. You think through these things year by year by year, just as part of doing what you do. You will document, you will think through it a little further, you will consult with your required stakeholders, and you will talk in your CLNA about how you will provide equal access. Not equal enrollment numbers, but equal access for all students, including special populations. I'm proud of this slide. We've been working for some months, and we're still in the process of making this real. From the beginning, we have hoped to provide robust, supportive resources to institutions to get this big, comprehensive local needs assessment job done. I think at TACD this year, there was a great deal of bewilderment. How will we do this? What will we do? What do you want us to do? What does it look like? And on our end, for the benefit of our state performance for Perkins and for CTE in general, we need to see that we get a good, consistent quality with good, consistent think-through. So here's what we have under plan, or in plan. We want to provide you with model comprehensive local needs assessments and guidance manuals for small, medium, large, and extra large institutions. We're hoping we will be using some reserve funds to bring this about. We will bring you program-level breakouts of the performance of your special populations. By CTE program, we can do it, now there's a typo in here. We will be able to do that for you, not down to the individual program, and I'll explain that in a minute necessarily, but by 4-digit breakouts and by 2, not 3, 2-digit breakouts. Now let me explain why we can't just give it to you for every program. FERPA becomes involved. We track your students all over the state, wherever they go. When it gets down to groups of under 5 for a given special population breakout, we're looking at essentially providing personal identifying information. And to the extent that we can give you a program level breakout, a CTE program level breakout of your special populations, show you their percentages of completion without violating FERPA guidelines, we will do so. If we can't do it at the 4-digit SIP breakout, we will do it at the 2-digit SIP breakout. And we hope you will find this useful. We have preliminary plans to provide you with at least 1, but possibly 2, significant technical assistance support conferences. I don't want to go into detail that yet because we don't have the specific parties on board yet, but I think we can bring you some national level technical support in this. And we'll post the link shown on this slide for Texas LMI. Anybody familiar with Texas LMI? few of you. It's a TWC product. It's free and it's user-friendly. It allows you to probe down into local, state, or regional labor market data. And it will be, we think, a powerful tool for you in doing your labor market research. And we will finally provide you with a library gathered from around the web that from CTE associations that just provide guidelines, ideas, approaches, ways to go about it for developing the comprehensive local needs assessment. We will have all of this in place by the end of this year or before. You should think about starting your comprehensive local needs assessment work this coming winter. You should not wait until May. We want to have those resources available for you. Notice the bottom bullet is any other resources identified. If you think something might be a good idea, I encourage you to let us know. We will take a look. Are there questions or comments? Anything from our folks online?
So there is a question. It says, is there a minimum number of stakeholders from various groups that we need for the comprehensive local needs feedback?
No. There's no statutorily defined minimum number. You should consult an adequate number for the groups you have to talk to. You will know that locally. It's going to vary from college district to college district. Other questions? Other online comments? We have a question back there? Yes, please. Samantha Uriegas, who writes some of the longest but best Perkins applications I've seen. Go. Yes, Samantha.
My question stems from the stakeholder meetings. Is it required that all the stakeholders meet at the same time, or can they be broken up into multiple sectors or areas?
That's your individual judgment.
Thank you.
Do what works for you. Other questions?
I might add that in our library, you'll see some material from Advanced CTE and other national organizations that have a lot of detailed suggestions about the stakeholder outreach and the structure of it and how to do that well. So those resources are there for you.
How does this look to you guys? Does this look like it's going to be helpful? Is there anything else that just jumps out at you as, duh, why didn't they see that? Anything else glaring that you think we need to provide you? Okay. Yeah, we keep about 300 extra staff on the second floor. We send them out all over the state. Well, this may help, though. You can charge the cost, including the personnel costs, of conducting this comprehensive local needs assessment to your transition year Perkins budget. So feel free to plan for it in this year's Perkins application. I will say, I think safely, I can guarantee that they'll be available by the end of the year. We expect them to be available earlier.
Mindy, a question came in.
Yes.
Do we need to document stakeholders' attendance like with a sign-in sheet?
Okay, you need to document that you had the meetings. I would document the people who came. For the special population stakeholders, I don't know that I would take names. I see nothing in the statute that requires that level of documentation. When you document that you talk to special population stakeholders, you are going to want to disaggregate the groups. Even if you talk to them in combination, you're going to want to indicate which special populations groups you talk to, and that's an important point. So document that you had the meeting, document the people you had in attendance, but I don't think you need to take names. It'd be great if you documented the businesses, for example, but I don't know that you need to do the owner, operator, or president of each business. Other questions? Do we have anything else we can talk about on this here agenda today?
We have our own stuff.
Yes, we have one little final thing waiting for you. Are we covering, or have we covered everything? Folks, we've got one final, good question. We've got one final little item we want to present to you today. Before we do that, we're going to take Samantha's question.
Thank you. Anything that's attributed to the CLNA planning in the Perkins application, where do you prefer it? Would it be under administration or direct costs in any of the other schedules?
Well, that's going to be your option. If you want to allocate staff time to it, Schedule A. If you anticipate supplies or travel, those respective schedules, F and B, you can certainly use indirect funds for it as you see fit.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. We're breaking land speed records here. We expected you all to pelt us with questions all day long, and I think the pelting is going to come subsequent to this workshop. Some of you are nodding and even nodding maniacally about it, but we will welcome all subsequent questions. Now we're going to move on to some Perkins Basic Essentials. Did I hear anything else over here? Okay. We're going to move on to some Perkins Basic Essentials. Usually we give a lot of advice for beginners that's also relevant for veterans. We hope you all find our standard issue Perkins orientation useful every year. We haven't had much of that today. This has been a gathering together about how we're going to get through the next 2 years. And my word to you is that we're going to do it together, and we're your allies, not your adversaries. However, let's move into a bit of standard issue Perkins Basic Orientation stuff. We're going to give you a little bit of lighthearted and we hope useful what each of us wish every Perkins program staff knew. And we've each made a slide for you. And I'll let Dwayne begin.
Again, some of them are repetitive from what we said earlier in our presentations. The two things that I would really like people to know when they're writing, and it kind of also addresses the question that was asked, how long of a narrative do we want? We really looking for the essential, we want you to write as much as you need to write, but we don't really want, especially in the performance improvement plan and evaluation plan, we don't want to copy and paste of something you said A, then just copy and paste it into part B, and then copy and paste it into part C. We're reading the same thing over and over again, and we're asking the question, yes, but how does this apply to this performance measure, or how does this apply to this particular question? So my first point, actually this is my second point, is that if you're citing programs, activities, budget items, anything for more than one core indicator, just make sure that you emphasize how that activity specifically relates to that particular core indicator, and give us some kind of indication that you've thought it through and say this will benefit because. And the second one, again, I mentioned before, if we have a timeline or a project that extends the full length of the grant, be sure to subdivide it into sub-activities or strategies that will kind of incrementally show how you're meeting the performance measures. And again, for the biannual reports and final reports, that will show some kind of incremental progress toward that goal. And it's now.
Flip to hers.
Sorry?
Yeah, let Marissa flip to hers.
Okay, and now Marissa has a couple.
Thank you, Dwayne. So typically, I think a lot of questions that come through the pipeline for me are budget related. So I felt that possibly these two can kind of help out, especially those newbies that are on board. So when submitting line items for amendment, follow Appendix L and use add, remove, increase, decrease in the description. I think that's just very helpful, and it's definitely just a kind of a little guideline for those newbies to kind of, get used to the budget, removals, adding some, things that need to be in there. Also, if you are adding line items to the budget, please be specific that the language shows a clear connection to the CTE. So I kind of feel like if it's something that's being incorporated with it, please add that information in there. I see a lot of where it's just like, oh, we're just going to get this and that. Well, how does it really relate to the CTE? Does it really function, with the CTE? So just be specific enough when you're doing that, and just kind of, I always feel like the more information you can give me, the better. So that way I'm not coming back to you with, well, what is this for? What do you need it? How is this incorporated with the CTE program? So, and really quick, Mindy, I got a request that if we can do, maybe once we're done, an intro of everybody and how long they've been with Perkins. I don't think we did that at the very beginning.
We didn't do that at the beginning.
Yeah.
Let's do it at the end.
Okay, so, and I will hand it over to Mindy.
In our rush to get through what we thought was going to be a jam schedule this morning, we did kind of intentionally skip that this year. However, we have a very good opportunity to tell each other who we are and what we do. So thank you. Let's do that at the end of this session. Okay, I hope this helps you. I'm going to show my slide. It's got two ways to do two types of line items in your budget, and I think you'll like it. Whoop. There we are. On applications, especially larger institutions, if you're sending people to conferences, you've got the travel on Schedule B, you've got the conference fees on Schedule F. You don't have to break out every fee in one line. Combine them. If you have a sufficient number of conference fees, just go to a second line item once you've used up your 255 character limit on this line item. Will that be easier for some of you? Good. Same with amendments. On amendments, you don't need to break out every little cost reduction or cost overage for every line item in that Schedule F budget. You can enter a line like this. That will be sufficient. I heard somebody say, oh, cool. Good. Now, if it's a significant reduction or overage, go ahead and break the line item out. Use your own judgment. But if you save $5,000, say, or $1,200 or $1,000 even maybe, you're going to want to break it out depending upon what it is. If it's a $23,000 piece of equipment over on Schedule C, you're going to need to tell us, line item that one. But on Schedule F, you can just combine these little things. Okay? All right, and I'll turn it over to Sherry and let her give you her 2 little things she wishes every Perkins person knew.
Oh, okay. My very first one is something that we actually said earlier. Please, please, please break out your narrative in paragraphs, 2 double returns, 2 hard returns, please, because it is really much, much easier to read and analyze what you're presenting and your argument that way. Please, please, please. Also, when you're thinking about your PIEP, the evaluation plan portion of it, and you're thinking about what your activity is and what your target's going to be, please, please, please think a little bit beyond just the fact that you're listing activities and your target is whether you accomplished them or not, because that's not an evaluation. An evaluation is a reflection of progress or impact. So please, please, please give us the opportunity to think about and actually enjoy your progress and your achievements. And give yourselves targets. You're required to give yourselves targets that are measurable. And that generally means the best way to do that is to quantify. So in the examples that you'll see when you look at this PowerPoint presentation in the weeks ahead, you'll see that there are some in Dwayne's presentation, there's some very specific good examples of a statement of an activity and its target. So please heed that advice. It's really the very best way to think about evaluation. And I'm going to add a third, and lastly, and it's kind of alluded to, and all of us have been saying this, all year long, when you all are providing us with amendments or emails about changes in your budget, and we always say Appendix K is your friend. Appendix K is the thing that you need to hold on to, look at. It's one I look at the most in the RFA. In this RFA, it's called Appendix L. We moved the letters up, right? So now Appendix L is your loving friend. Think of it that way, okay? L for loving friend. It really does give you beautiful examples of all the different schedules and all the different, and the specific way that you should do the add, the decrease, how you show what amendment number is, and how you explain the link into CTE. So Appendix L is your friend, your loving friend. With that, yes? Yes. So that's our, we have another question? Perkins Basic Essentials, or at least those things that were the tips that we wanted to give you all.
Are there any other questions about anything today? Well, we have 2 luxuries here. One is a leisurely introduction of our group who's here today. Folks on webcast, I'm sorry we don't have a way for you to introduce yourselves. We would like to upgrade our technology and be able to WebEx this or something one day, but right now we have what we have. Please let me tell the folks on webcast that we appreciate your presence and your contributions via email comments and questions today. So we have the luxury of a long introduction of one another. The other luxury we have is that we're going to be able to adjourn early today. This has never happened at a Perkins Basic Orientation. You all are witnessing history and are a part of history. Let's do introductions, and I'm going to start with the Lone Ranger up here on the first row. I will ask you to introduce yourself and pass the mic back.
So Alan Thomas with Blinn College, and I've technically been with Perkins a negative amount of time at this point, since until we hire my replacement, I will not officially be changing my job title.
I forgot to mention an important thing. We would like for you to evaluate this day. Evaluations are coming around as we speak, and you can fill those out as we're doing introductions if you'd like. Here you go, Kristen.
Kristen Walker, Trinity Valley Community College. I've just been with Perkins in workforce education with Trinity Valley since August, so I'm still a newbie, but have been in higher ed for over 16 years with another institution.
Miranda Phillips, Lamar Institute of Technology, and I am new to Perkins on the higher ed side. I have done Perkins on the high school side, but not higher ed.
Melissa Armitar with Lamar Institute of Technology. I've been involved with Perkins at LIT for about 6 years. It is now my primary responsibility.
Sheila Trahan. I'm with Lamar State College, Port Arthur, and I've been the Perkins director there for 4 years. I've been in higher education for 19 years. Oh, I'm retiring. I think that's what she's talking about. In August 31st.
And congratulations. You're an example to us all.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gretchen Reel. I'm the Associate Vice President for Workforce Education for Austin Community College. I've been spending Perkins money for many years. I'm not directly over Perkins at ACC, but I work closely with, I'm responsible for all the workforce programs, so we spend our money. We're the spenders.
Hi, my name is Angelica Cancino Sandoval. I'm with Austin Community College. I'm the director of in the Special Populations Department at Austin Community College, and actually am the direct person that actually writes this for Austin Community College. And I've been doing it for 3 years.
My name is Ricardo Uribe Jr. from Broadsport College. I'm Division Chair for Mechanical and Construction Technologies. Been with Perkins since 10 a.m. this morning. And I'm helping out our program director, Beth Cassidy.
I think that's a newbie record. Do you guys agree?
Bubba Adams, Vice President of Instruction at Panola College. I've been dealing with Perkins for about 10 years.
I'm Natalie Oswalt, Panola College. I'm the Dean of Art, Sciences, and Technology, so most of our Perkins programs fall under my umbrella of supervision. So I work closely with Stacy on request, program, evaluation, that sort of thing, but I do not write the grants. So I'm glad that we have her.
Yes. I'm Stacy G. from Panola College. I'm the Perkins Program Coordinator, so I'm writing the grant and everything, and I've been doing that for about 6 years.
Mary Chance, Panola College Grants Coordinator. I've been with Perkins over 10 years.
I am Jennifer Schromick from Del Mar College. I'm a new interim dean of Business Health Sciences and Professional Education for 3 weeks, and that means I inherited Perkins 3 weeks ago.
Hi there, I'm Deb Roberts. I'm the Executive Director for Workforce Program Development at Lone Star College, and I inherited Perkins from a very seasoned Perkins expert at our system, and I've been involved for about 15 months.
Juanita Stanley, I'm a grants administrator at Lone Star College, and I've been with Perkins about 6 years.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Trice with Lone Star College, and I am grant developer, brand new, so Perkins is also new to me.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Joe Hayen with Coastal Bend College. I'm the Director of Continuing Education. And like the gentleman over here, I've been with Perkins for about, 3 hours and 35 minutes. So.
Sherry Davis, I'm with Hill College. I have actually worked with Perkins twice over the last 25 years, so a total of, I think, about 11 years. But I've been working with it for the last 4 years, consistently.
Samantha Uriegas, South Texas College. I'm the Grant Management and Compliance Officer and the Perkins Principal Investigator at our institution, and I've been working with Perkins directly and indirectly for a little over 18 years.
And I'm Dr. Virginia Champion. I'm the Director for Grant Development, Management, and Compliance at South Texas College, and I'm very grateful for Samantha in our department. She does an outstanding job. I've been at South Texas College for 3.5 years.
Hi, I'm Angela McCauley, and I'm Senior Grant Writer at Texas Southmost College, just down the road from them. And this is year 2 of Perkins for me.
I'm Leslie Keeling Olson. I'm with Temple College, and I'm on 17 years.
I'm Cheryl George Jones. I'm with Houston Community College, and I've been the Perkins director for about 5 years now.
Karina Sanchez, Houston Community College, and I've been with 3 years.
Victor Gomez, Houston Community College, been with the Perkins program for about 5 years.
I'm Rudy Sandoval. I'm with Central Texas College. I'm the director of Government Community Relations, and Carl Perkins fell under my auspices and about 8 months ago, and so here to learn as much as I can.
I'm Tomoko Olson. I'm director of the grants management at San Jacinto College. I oversee Perkins grants accounting.
I'm Scott Harrison, also with San Jacinto College. I've been with the college about 16 years, but basically new to Perkins.
I'm Kevin Morris from San Jacinto College. I'm the Dean of Business and Technology at our South Campus. Been on Perkins about 7 years, just really starting to understand it, so this is a great time to change it.
Van Wigington. I am the provost at San Jacinto College Central Campus, and I lead the Dean's Council, who has responsibility over Perkins. So I've been on Perkins for 3 years, inheriting it from Catherine O'Brien, who was my mentor.
And before we move back over to the other side of the room, I'm going to get these guys hiding in the back.
Hello, everyone. Juan Garza from TSTC. I've been with Perkins for about 7 years. It's part of the duties that I do, and I manage the Office of Sponsored Programs.
Hello, I'm Joyce Williams. I stepped into the big shoes of Don Perry when he retired a year and a half ago, well, 2 years ago, and he had Perkins for about 30 years. So I'm not going to even talk about me with Perkins, but we're gonna have a director of Perkins position open. I'm saying that out loud over the website and everywhere else.
You can't beat free advertising when you're a community college. Okay, webcasters, got that?
Hello, Jennifer Schaefer, Blaine College. I've been with Perkins for 10 years.
Hello, Anthony Walker, Tarrant County College. I've been with Perkins for 2 years, and I've been asked to say that Miss Candy Sinner, our District Director of Curriculum and Educational Planning, and Dr. Nancy Curie are on the webcast as well. She's our Project Director.
Hi, I'm Kim Moss Lanier with Tarrant County College, and I've been with Perkins for about almost 2 years.
Hi, I'm Pam Millsap. I'm the Vice President for Academic Affairs at Lamar State College, Port Arthur. And I've had the luxury of being indirectly with Perkins by having good people who answer to me in the chain be responsible for Perkins. And as you all were congratulating Sheila Trahan, I'm mourning her retirement. So thank you to Sheila.
Thank you, everybody. And as I walk back to the front of the room, let me thank you for coming from near and far to be here today. We look forward to hearing your feedback about today on these evaluations. We try to tool the orientation every year to be maximally useful. This has been an atypical year, and we're interested to hear what you have to say, particularly interested in hearing from you through evaluations and post-orientation about any other way we can provide assistance and be a resource. I believe if we have no other business, we have one.
One more question that came in, and it says, the CLA is definitely going to require some funds for information material and meeting-related resources. Do you have a guideline how to estimate a reasonable amount for this requirement?
We have not developed a set of guidelines for how to estimate a reasonable cost for this activity. I would say, that's a very good question. I would say that you should use your best judgment about costs in the closest equivalent situations. If you need to do research, what does it cost you to do that in the past? If you need to hold a gathering, what do you anticipate the cost of a typical gathering like that to be? All we can ask is that you use your best and most prudent judgment. Costs that don't seem to be too far out of a reasonable range, I don't think we're going to question. Make sure you justify any costs that you do a line item for on your Perkins budgets. And if we have questions about any line item, we will certainly ask them and help you get your budget into schedule or into shape for that. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, thank you. That was a good closing question. Ladies and gentlemen, we are adjourned. Thank you.